You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. July's almost over.
Yes, it is. Almost. The year went by fast.
Yeah, this heat has been something.
Yes, it has.
So today we have an interesting topic. I don't do home inspections anymore, but once in a while I have to do an inspection for a real estate purchase. And so it gave me this idea for our topic, and it's buying a home with mold history. What disclosure laws don't protect you from? So when you hear about disclosures, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Something somebody's got to tell you about a house before you decide whether you buy it.
How often do you think that sellers actually disclose?
Less than 3% of the time.
Yeah.
Very little.
Yeah, I always would tell my clients when I did home inspections, I don't know. I think some people intentionally will not disclose, but I think a lot of people they're just not aware of issues.
Yeah, but I also think people don't want to disclose something because they know that a potential buyer will want them to fix it before they buy.
Right. Well, we have, I'm in a professionals group, and we have now holistic realtors.
Oh, that's right. What is a holistic realtor?
Well, I don't know, you'd kind of have to ask them, but more or less they're trying to focus on like health issues.
Oh.
I mean, we have a Tori McGee, she's down in, I think, Georgia.
Okay.
And there's several other ones. I'm in a Facebook group, and I think she's a realtor in Florida, but more or less, it's just realtors that focus on all that stuff. Whereas, one of my books, my second bestseller is Toxic Mold and Home Inspections, What Your Realtor Won't Tell You. What I cover in that is realtors that, well, and it's true, they get paid to sell a home. So if they don't sell the home, it's not good for them. So they try to, and there's a lot of good realtors. I'm not trying to, criticize realtors, but there's a lot of realtors that are just like, hey, we want to close so we can make our money.
Yeah. And I think in Black Mold and Home Inspection, is it Black Mold and Home Inspections? Yes. It's an interesting read because you walk people through in that book what they should be on the lookout for, even if their realtors don't tell them those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I want our listeners to understand every state is different when it comes to disclosure laws. I'm not a realtor. I'm not a lawyer, but I would imagine it varies a little bit. But for the most part, I would assume they're all fairly the same. So what we're talking about, for our listeners, this is buying a home. It's not brand new. It could be, but it's new to them.
Mm-hmm.
What in your opinion, what is the problem with a realtor that takes care of all the inspections?
Well, there was no problem with it when I was doing it, and my realtor took care of all of my inspections because I thought, man, it's easier for me not to have to deal with it. But then if you really think about it, the conflict of interest, if a realtor is hiring your home inspector and they want to close fast so they can make their commission, they're going to hire a home inspector who isn't as thorough to get the home to pass, quote unquote, to get the home to close so the realtor can make their commission.
Right. And you didn't know this until obviously we were together. But what's the disadvantage to having your realtor take care of it all?
Well, you don't really know what's going on.
Well, and you don't know if they're doing mold testing,
no
radon testing.
I mean, my realtors always took care of the home inspections, and I never once saw a home inspection report.
Wow.
So, I mean,
wow.
I just knew that it passed and I could go to closing.
Yeah. When I did home inspections, it was, I would say, probably 60 to 80% of the time, the realtor is the one that reached out to me.
Yeah.
And, that's a problem. So I want our listeners to understand why, and I want to hear your opinion on it. What's the problem with only hiring just a home inspector?
Well, because home inspectors do not do mold inspections. And even if they do, they're generalists, not specialists. So they're not going to be as thorough or as good with a mold inspection.
Okay. So what about people like myself that I'm a certified home inspector?
Well, I mean, you bring that skill set to the table, but you're a mold specialist first and foremost. That's your arena and your expertise.
Right. So for our listeners, you already touched on that. General home inspection, it's a generalist. It's non-invasive, and even mold inspections are non-invasive in a real estate transaction. Mm-hmm. But it's like going to your GP. If you have, we'll touch on, mycotoxin exposure, chronic fatigue, brain fog, irritability, things like that. Well, the first person you go to is your GP.
Yeah.
And then if they're a good one, they're going to say, oh, okay, you need to go to, they usually say an allergy doctor, which we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But my point is for our listeners, going to your GP is like hiring a home inspector. They're just a generalist.
Exactly.
Geez, it's been years and years since I got certified, but they teach you how to, see pest intrusion or termites or the need for a mold inspector, but it's very limited. So your home inspector is going to go in there and their job is to do an overall assessment. Then if they think you need an electrician, a plumber, a mold specialist, a termite inspector, that's what they do.
Yes.
Plus, most home inspectors are usually in and out of there in a couple hours.
Yeah, they're not doing the all day mold inspections that you do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like for our listeners, when I do a mold inspection, whether it's a real estate transaction or not, it's an all day thing. Mm-hmm. And if it's a real estate purchase, a real estate transaction, I do the home inspection along with the mold inspection. So for our listeners, they're probably wondering, like, what's the difference? There's a lot of differences.
Yeah.
For a home inspection, we're, doing electrical and stuff like that. For a mold inspection, I don't deal with electrical. I inspect the windows, but I don't open and close them. I don't open and close the doors. There are certain things. My point is that we don't do as a mold inspector.
Exactly. That you would do as a home inspector because it's a generalist approach.
Right. And there are things like electrical that have nothing to do with mold.
Yes.
So going back to, why is it not a good idea to only have a home inspection? You just don't have the expertise from someone like myself that's a specialist.
Correct. And so part of what you're talking about is what disclosure laws don't protect you from. So if a seller suspects mold, do they have to disclose it to a potential buyer?
That's where I think that's a little bit of a gray area. If they suspect it, I would assume that they're probably not going to disclose that. Now, if the seller had a mold inspector come in and do mold testing, they have to disclose that if the mold inspector has red flags.
Okay, so if a homeowner has ever done a mold inspection and red flags came back from that formal mold inspection, then by law, the seller has to disclose that.
I believe that, once again, for our listeners, I'm not a lawyer.
And it's worth checking state to state just to make sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said, if they're not sure, then I don't think that they have to.
Which is why a lot of people who are planning to sell a house, if they quote unquote suspect mold, they will not get it tested because they don't want to be required to disclose it.
Well, and I tell my clients that, just so you know, if you want mold testing done and you plan to sell the home, you have to disclose that, period. So let's kind of go over the whole disclosure part.
Okay.
When I do a real estate transaction, so my client's buying a home, whether it's brand new or just new to them, I like to get the disclosure before I do the inspection.
Why?
Because if they note certain things, that tells me, hey, let's pay attention to that. Because in a disclosure, it asks if there were moisture intrusion events, if the home's ever had a fire, if it's ever had mold. And once again, they're different in every state. But if I have that document, it helps me to know, because once again, like, I don't know, recently I did a mold inspection and I thought that there was termite damage because I could see this it looked like almost like sawdust.
Yes.
And it's a log home. Well, come to find out, they just had it rechinked last year. And the company did like sandblasting.
Okay.
So it was just the media, the sand, but it did look like
termites.
Exactly.
Stuff. Yeah.
So, and I guess my point is I didn't know that till after I did the inspection. So just like a mold inspector or a home inspector, we don't know the history of the home.
Exactly. Okay, that makes sense. So really, it's important to get a mold inspection if you're going to buy a home, because you need to know if you're dealing with mold.
Exactly.
Okay.
And our listeners are probably mold sensitive. So there are, I'm sure, a handful of us out there that are certified home inspectors and certified mold inspectors. But for our listeners, I would make sure that you hire a mold inspector and you have whatever test done.
What are the expectations of a mold inspection for a potential buyer of a home? Because sometimes I think people assume that if you hire somebody to do a mold inspection for a house you're thinking about buying, that mold inspector can go into that house, move stuff from where they are in somebody else's house, do invasive holes in wall. Like, can you explain what somebody should expect if they're wanting an expert to do a mold inspection on a house they might buy?
Well, it's just like a home inspector. It's a non-invasive inspection.
Okay.
So, most of my clients, they're the homeowner. They think they have mold issue. Maybe they've done mycotoxin testing on the medical side. Well, they're the homeowner. This isn't a real estate transaction. They can give me permission, which they have to sign a disclaimer that more or less says, hey, we can pull this baseboard off, or we can drill a hole to put a bore scope in there. But in a real estate transaction, the sellers aren't going to let you do that.
No.
So for our listeners, to answer your question, this is how I operate. And I don't know how other professionals operate, but when I do a mold inspection, I give my clients pricing for air testing, surface sampling, mycotoxin testing. We don't really know what testing we're going to do until the inspection's done.
Okay.
And the reason behind that is, we've talked about this before. If I find mold, and let's just say it's a real estate transaction, my client has to give me permission, and then I'll do a tape lift so that a certified lab, can verify, yes, it's mold. But if I don't find anything, then maybe we go to the air testing or mycotoxin testing.
Okay.
So for our listeners, make sure you understand that most mold inspectors or mold specialists are going to want to do the inspection first. And then I reach out to my client when I'm almost finished and I say, hey, here's what I recommend for testing. Then they get to decide. So that our listeners understand this, there isn't just like a set standard of tests that we do for every inspection. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it depends on the situation, right?
Exactly.
Even to the extent of whether somebody should bring a mold dog into the equation for a pre-purchase inspection.
Right. Speaking of mold dogs, for our listeners, and I know they're more expensive, if you're mold sensitive and you're purchasing a home, I would personally start with the mold dog.
Why?
Because if they alert to something, we know where to look.
Oh, okay.
And we've done episodes about this, but make sure that the handler of the mold dog is a certified mold inspector too.
Yeah, and has had experience doing that.
Because some handlers are not really mold specialists. They kind of are like, well, the dog's trained, and that's what we do is we just put blue tape on the wall wherever the mold dog hits.
Okay.
You need someone, like you said, that's experienced, that can do the CSI investigation.
Yeah, they know what they're looking for and they know what they're seeing, and they're not just relying on the mold dog alone
Right.
to figure out what's going on.
Right. And the mold dog, I like to compare stuff to the medical side. The mold dog would be like, your orthopedic doing an x-ray or an MRI. It's going to tell you what to focus on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if the mold dog hits somewhere and I don't see any water stains, then I'm like, okay, maybe I can, try to get a wall cavity test. It's a game changer in my opinion, because as humans, I can smell mold, but not like a dog.
No, certainly not. So again, you're saying definitely get a mold inspection if you're going to buy a house, not just a home inspection. Use a mold dog because that can at least accelerate what the mold inspector will do after
Right.
the mold dog inspection. What's your call to action for people?
Make sure, and you just said it, make sure you hire the proper inspectors.
Okay.
Don't just
in
go
the proper order.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, just keep in mind for our listeners, a home inspector is not going to have the expertise and probably the equipment or even the sampling media to do the type of testing that a mold specialist would.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners, do your due diligence, ask questions, get the disclosure from the sellers before the inspector goes in, and share that with the inspector.
And educate yourself. Take things like the Mold 101, the mycotoxin prevention kit, so
Exactly.
you know about mold.
Yep. Yeah, we have courses, we have digital bundles. So, and as our listeners know, I offer home purchasing packages where I'm literally with them throughout the entire process. If they just don't trust their specialists, I can do just a simple 90-minute consultation.
Absolutely. Go to cnccontractorservices.com and learn about all of it.
Yep. All right. Well, we appreciate all of our listeners. Have a great week.
Thanks for tuning in. Would you like to get a handle on mold in your home? What it is, how to spot it, and what to do next? If you said yes to that, the Mold 101 bundle is your all-in-one guide. Packed with self-assessment worksheets, a workbook, video walkthroughs, and expert audio coaching, this digital bundle gives you the tools to protect your home and your family. Visit cnccontractorservices.com/the Mold 101 bundle and get started today. Again, visit cnccontractorservices.com/the Mold 101 bundle and get started today.